Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Deep Thoughts on this cold, rainy night. It has stopped raining for now. I've got everything insulated in case it does start raining on me. I can at least handle quite a bit of rain at this point. For those of you who are devout listeners, you'll know that we've weathered a few storms together. So today I had a request that I thought was pretty damn good, which is a request to discuss directed energy weapons specifically as opposed to embedding them in other episodes. And it's a really weird journey for me personally. And the camera looks like E.T. with a little blanket over its head. Which I just watched this Xfinity reboot of E.T. with the Henry Thomas character who played Elliot. It's kind of a, it's not as amazing as the movie, but they built a Muppet of this thing, or a puppet, or whatever you want to call it, and it was pretty endearing for those of you who've seen the first film. All right, so directed energy weapons. Immediately, this is demonetized, of course, because it has the word weapons in it. It's really where they get you. If I just say DEW, then no one will find the episode in general. So I'm surfing the web, 10 years ago. And this woman, Dr. Judy Woods, is giving this lecture. I look at the timestamp on this thing. It's it was 3 hours and 40 minutes or something like that, which made me automatically cringe. But it says, something to the effect of directed energy weapons exist. This presentation by Judy Woods is going to prove it to you. And I'm like, oh God, we know that these weapons, well, I should say this. My journey of it is like this. When the game from Westwood Studios came out called Command & Conquer, there was something called the Ion Cannon. It's a fictional game, of course, and you wanted to build this thing fairly quickly because it would zap the crap out of the ground. It was like a nuke without any nuclear radiation. It just destroyed the building that you were in. And of course, if you were in it, it would, I guess, theoretically fall on your head or something like that. And so that was it. And, explained that it was using the electrons from generally the Van Allen belts, but didn't say Van Allen belts, which again are made of electrons. There's electrons everywhere. It's just ethereal matter spinning in a particular way. They can charge a wire that's conductive, any surface that's conductive, and you can gather and coil and store, depending on what mechanism you're using, the power. And because we know how to direct energy in a laser, we can create all forms of laser, all forms of projected energy cyclones and columns, and beam a bunch of energy at you. Many of you know about this stuff with the microwave sort of crowd control weapons that they've discussed using. I don't know if they've ever used them in public, probably in China, where the value of life inland is marginal. But the day after, I should say the week after 9/11, we can say it because we're going to demonetize this one, Donald Rumsfeld was asked by, I believe, a British female whether or not they thought, the Pentagon thought, that directed energy weapons were being used against World Trade Centers to bring them down. Because despite what the, 6 media companies that control the world, and again, what's strange about that is I tracked it to 4, because one bought one and it was at 5, and then one bought the other, and then it was consolidated to 4. But whatever, 4 to 6 companies. They're not telling you about these options. They're not telling you that physics was absolutely negated the day of 9/11 in terms of what you saw and what you were told happened. Now, of course, there's a billion things about 9/11 that are crazy. The guy on CNN with the brown hair, who was like the head anchor at the time, stopped when the second plane hit the World Trade Center, and he said, "Oh my God, it looks like the nose cone came out the other side." And so you have a plane that supposedly penetrates this building, made of aluminum, going through a concrete barrier that's 50% of the interior of the building, reinforced with 49 box girder beams, which, trust me, you could fly in a plane directly out of box girder beam. You might get it to vibrate. It's so huge and so strong. But the nose cone, because the special effects team that was creating these shots for you blew it, it comes out the other side of the building and then sucks back in. Typically, that's a waypoint in 3D software, which gained a Bezier curve when they wanted it to be a straight point-to-point movement. And so it's going from point A to point B, but it has a bit of an elliptical orbit to get to the final destination. So it goes out way further than it should. For those of you who've drawn in Illustrator, you know all about this. So we have a hospital about a block away. And so sometimes it's the ambulance, but when it hauls ass, it's a cop car. But anyway, when you draw in Illustrator, you'll know when you're connecting 2 points with the curve tool or line tool. You can get these wild Bezier curves. That's most likely what happened in whatever software they were using. Now, the reason why they had to do it live, I think, has to do with the fact that the shots were coming in that day and they didn't know where exactly the cameras were going to be down to the pixels, so they had to pull things off, shoot some plates, and then bring them in, and then when they played them back to you, you believe that the airplane was, or the plane taking the shot, especially the airplane coming in, was at that moment live in time, but you don't really know. But anyway, I think most people on the in who know about building demolition, even Donald Trump came out the day of and said it looked like, someone had demolished the buildings physically with explosives. The firefighters said, they heard all kinds of secondary explosions, and when it fell, it was both of them. They, heard pop, 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 pop all the way down. Now, Building 7 is a straight-up demolition. Anyone who's ever seen a building demolished with demolition, the Controlled Demolition family, or many of the families out there, just open your eyes. Come on. They blow the center column. The windows actually explode from the bottom up, then the center column pops, and then poof, into a beautiful pile. Whoever blew these buildings up, seriously, A for the day. Unfortunately, it's attached to a conspiracy. So where does directed energy weapons come in? Well, when you present a story to the masses that defies physics, that defies engineering, that defies metallurgy, the problem is that the masses don't know anything about it. It's just like unexplained science. They get to lie to you about every way they mitigated things going to the moon. But when you show it to the entire world and you say, this is the pretext for us going to war, this is the pretense of why everyone in the room feels horrible and feels terrified, as well as Dr. Stephen Jones, with another PhD in Brigham Young University, and tons of other engineers and architects for 9/11. Truth, which their numbers are staggering. I mean, they have over, I believe, 3,600 PhDs and almost 10,000 master's degrees, all going in and saying, look, this is physically impossible. What you said occurred is physically impossible. Now, I don't think I'm going to get into why all this happened today. You saw what happened afterwards, right? Go read Zygmunt Brzezinski's book, The Grand Chessboard. It'll explain everything to you in 1997. Go read the neocon paper with Cheney calling for a new Pearl Harbor. I believe in 92 or something, with Donald Rumsfeld inside the document. I think Kissinger's in the document. I mean, seriously. They had this plan for ages. But Judy made this video, and I love her to death. I would give her a massive hug. I'd probably give her a mouth kiss if she wanted one. But she's a genius. When I watched this video, I started off going, oh my God, come on, really? I believe things happened, but I was sure it was all thermate explosives, the sulfurized military version of thermite. I'm sure, Dr. Stephen Jones, he proved it. We'll get into him if I can remember after we go down this huge, long path. Now, Judy, she's a little dry, right? She's not there to entertain. She's there to educate. So if you're looking for, a Steve Jobs presentation or something elaborate, it's not going to be there. But it's sourced. It's sourced in science. Now, Judy has committed herself to a ton of things because the day of 9/11 woke her up so hardcore that all these conspiracy theories that were bouncing around and people criticizing people who believe in them gained her attention. And she's just like, okay, let's talk about this. She got into chemtrails, hardcore. She got into HARP. She was the one that taught me about something called infrasonic undulation, which has to do with the HARP antenna or similar devices somewhere else in the world, modulating clouds, modulating and potentially spreading out chemtrails. We always wonder why barium oxide is inside chemtrails. Nano-sized barium oxide, nano-sized aluminum oxide. What's potentially the case is that when they're spraying this stuff, barium can electrically or take the atmosphere and make it conductive. And so if you want to spray something and have it spread out, you spray a line, but you hit it with the HARP object, some type of HARP antenna, which could be mounted on a plane that's further up, and essentially vibrates and spreads with this infrasonic undulation the chemtrail out like a fillet of fish. You're just literally looking at the scale of a fish, like the spine and then the fillet of it, right? That's a different story. So what is the theory behind directed energy weapons? It's actually a remarkably simple theory. I can only assume that the engineering to create such a weapon is seriously a brilliant weapon with probably tremendous amounts of engineering and testing and what have you. So whoever put these things together is most likely, certifiably genius level human beings. But this is one of those reasons why I don't want folks to completely blow off some form of satellite. A lot of people are like, satellites don't exist, man. It's like, okay, if you believe that, the problem is you make yourself susceptible to them if they exist. Imagine people telling you that the world is flat such that they don't have to, and then you erase space, you erase gravity, and you erase satellites. And so you think you're safe when you're not. And so what ends up happening is they infect your brain to ignore the Kaiser Sose, the devil that's above you, doing all kinds of crazy shit to you. Well, I don't know, why are we all turning into zombies? Gee, I don't know. Because there can't be anything up there because you've adopted a theory of the world that won't let anything be up there, but there's a fuck ton of shit up there fucking everything up. So it's important not to go too deep and lose your mind. The theory is this. Obviously, even in my ether model of the universe, there are forces that hold various materials together at various strengths. So steel has a certain density and strength. Meaning more dense something is, in my world, there are more finite currents per capita of space. And so gold is a lot heavier than, say, aluminum. Okay, well, those are currents of energy, of ethereal particles. You can go up to whatever model of the universe and physics you want, and it's still the same thing. Now, if you could get in there and mess with the currents that hold this thing together. Looks like I'm smoking, but it's 46 degrees out here, so you can see my breath. Trippy. Show must go on, baby. So, this geocentric satellite is straight above you. Straight above whatever they're trying to nail. Could be planes, but the evidence that Judy presented makes it look like it was straight overhead. But she gets into all this evidence relating to 9/11. Especially towers that disintegrated upon falling. So what'd you see when you saw two 110-story gigantic skyscrapers fall? Well, it was pretty amazing for the first 3 seconds of the 6.5 seconds they took to fall, roughly. Again, we're talking about stuff falling free fall. Never, ever going to happen in a structural fire. All these buildings that are burned in England, burned in Dubai, burned over there, all over the world, right? Towering Inferno was a movie I saw when I was a kid. It was a building that was legitimately on fire based on some other fires we'd had in the 70s, and they didn't just fall down. Okay. Well, but these were hit by planes. To recap the World Trade Center's designs, they were designed to be hit by 5 fully loaded, fully fueled 737s. You might say, but, I think there were 757s that hit the World Trade Centers. Okay, there's a 70-pound difference between the two. However, the 757s were not remotely fully loaded, so they were probably actually several hundred pounds lighter than what it was designed to be hit by. But this is 5 737s would have to collide into the same hole, the same area of the building before there was any structural damage that would cause it to collapse like a tree, boom, fall over. And that top part is always going to hit the ground. Something you have to remember. Now, if you look at pictures of the World Trade Centers, as a little bit of rain comes on me, gotta make sure my computer is completely covered here. The 2 World Trade Centers have these lighter bands in them, about a third up and 2/3 up. The reason why those bands exist is they're impact floors. They're specifically designed to take the blunt force of the previous floors that might fall. So the first third can only fall to that first band, the 2/3 up. This 2/3 can fall to the first band, a third up, and the thing's not going to completely collapse to the ground. Now they use those as also maintenance floors because there's so much reinforcement on those floors. You can't put apartments in there, you can't put buildings in there, so they stored all of their laundry equipment and whatever. Okay, so sometimes it gets deprecated. Oh, no, those aren't those. Those are maintenance floors. Well, they're maintenance floors because they can't put anything else because it's so reinforced. A couple things you need to understand. When FEMA released the blueprints of the World Trade Centers, the inner box girder beams were erased for the blueprint. Really? Well, without that, you don't have a building that would stand up in the first place. Plus, it had reinforced concrete interior. Again, 50% of the floor plan is this interior. That's how they were able to build the building, with the outer structure being a big part of what held it up. And it, barely got injured from these planes hitting. I mean, seriously, you've got easily on 4 sides, you might have on any one particular structural connection, you've probably got 70-80% of the outer structure completely intact, which is way more than it needs to stay together. Now, I am a no-planer. I don't believe any planes hit the World Trade Center. For those of you who've never heard that theory before, the problem is in all the footage of the planes, if you really, really super duper pay attention, they've made a bunch of special effects errors. You should go look them up. This is using footage from all the news stations, so it's not someone else creating this and like someone CGing it together. This is like Fox News, ABC, NBC, everyone who covered it, right? We took their footage and rolled it back and went, whoa. One of the planes flew in front of a building that was in the background. One of them flew behind a building that was in the foreground. Oopsie. You see the dimensions of the planes actually change prior to impacting the towers. You see in one footage, it looks like almost the turbine disappears because the hole they made in the side of the World Trade Center number 1, which was hit second, wasn't big enough for the plane. So they just, it's amazing what they did. I mean, it was a hell of a scam, right? Unfortunately, people died. That's the problem. People jumped. People were blown out of windows because the explosives going off inside were literally throwing people out of any resistance hole or a lack of resistance hole. Firefighters died when these things hit. I mean, it's a horrific situation, people. This is not one of these situations where we're claiming that everybody survived, nothing happened. Hell no. I can only hope that some of the faces they put up downstairs were fake, but I don't think they were. So please don't think I'm saying that. So when you saw the very first building fall, which was World Trade Center 1, that was hit second, right? What did you see? You saw this collapse start to happen. Now, the fireball, which everyone saw for the second impact, was much bigger in everyone's psychological mind. So what did you actually see if there were no planes? Well, you see a bunch of detonations And you see on TV the plane hitting around the same exact time. So I've actually had friends of mine that said, I saw the planes hit the World Trade Center. I said, okay, where did you see it? Where were you standing? And they all said, one form or another on TV. I was downstairs at a restaurant, but the World Trade Center was right outside. I heard a plane scream across, and I looked up, and then there was the explosion, but not the actual impact. Everyone who called in that day were like producers and cameramen. Can they get all these people in on the conspiracy? Yeah, they can. Because there wasn't that many. But let's say there were planes. It doesn't really matter. But when that first chunk, which is about, 40% of the second tower that was hit, starts to tip over, you see it. It's tipping. There's a giant portion. It's 110 stories. Take 40% of that. It's at least 42 stories. It's starting to tip over. But it's also starting to go down. And it's, crushing, supposedly, this Discovery Channel, Purdue University pancake theory, which would have left about 35 floors compacted at the bottom. That wasn't what you saw. You saw to the outer ectoskeleton, in the ground. It was a bunch of debris, but it ain't 30 stories. But the problem is that at no point in me dropping this cigar right now to hit the ground, is it going to vaporize before it hits the ground? And that's what happened to that top section. That top section should have hit the ground undisturbed, because that's what happens, right? You knock the milk off the table on accident. What does the milk glass and the milk vaporize every once in a while? No, it hits the ground. But that never happened. What do you think would happen if 42 stories were dropped on your neighborhood? Just out of thin air. And it starts up like 60 stories up. I think there'd be a big hole in the ground. A gigantic hole in the ground. I think the amount of casualties on the ground would have been potentially 10 times as much, right? The day was heavily orchestrated. And we know this because there were some Jewish kids filming it across the Hudson River, dancing on top of a van. They have admitted this on their little version of MTV over there in Israel. When asked, what were you doing there? They said, we didn't have anything to do with it. We were simply told to document it. Live television, go look it up. Look up Israeli dancers 9/11. They detain the kids, and the State Department makes a phone call and says, you let these kids go. There's an empty van. It tests positive for all kinds of explosives, but it's empty. When they went back to the company that owned the van, the owner of the company was already trying to get out of New York and get to Israel. I mean, I'm not trying to blame one group. Maybe they were just watching. Who the hell knows, right? Everyone's responsible, especially the United States government. But there's Judy Woods, directed energy weapons. I'm setting this up so you understand. If I just tell you directed energy weapons, you might just roll your eyes. So I'm giving you the things that were impossible that day. The buildings atomized into pyroclastic clouds, which is why there were so many gigantic clouds going down all the streets, while everyone died of black lung who tried to clean the place up. Plus the buildings were full of asbestos. Think about atomizing all of this precious metal and wild plastics and stuff, and you're breathing it, You're believing the Red Cross, who told you it was safe. A bunch of gold was being stolen out of the basement of the World Trade Centers. It was eventually recovered, and that's when the cleanup stopped. But they hadn't finished cleaning up everything, especially the body parts of survivors. It's a bad day, man. Bad day. United States military at some corrupt level was definitely involved because NORAD stood down. Dick Cheney made sure that whatever was coming at the Pentagon hit the Pentagon. A missile with wings is first reported, and most likely is 100% true. Building 7 was the headquarters of the entire operation, with Giuliani's sort of terror response floor being, I think, the top floor. But it was just recently reinforced with the millions of dollars to make sure it was safe for him. But he knew the place was going to be blown up because the operation is being... It's a perfect place to sit because you can see the two towers from it. So you can orchestrate everything, get all your stuff together, and then you blow up your headquarters. I went to New York in December of 2007 for New Year's, and Building 7 had been completely rebuilt and had never hit the airwaves that had been rebuilt. They don't want you to focus on that building. Supposedly, a plane crashed in a farmer's field in Shanksville. Now, something went down supposedly 8 miles away, and it left a gigantic field of debris, but we've never seen that ever on film that I know of. But the farmer recently just came out and said, you know that slit in the ground where they told you the plane went? He goes, I dug that 2 years before the event occurred. You never saw any bodies. You never saw any plane parts. Biggest lie in history. Okay, great. But the principle of a directed energy weapon is that you can hit the metal of a certain type, which is all being held together by chemistry, by nuclear bonds that hold things together. The plastic is different than the metal. If they're different grades of metal, different grades of density, well, then that's going to potentially force you to use different frequencies to hold these things together. A gold bar is going to hold together different than aluminum. So what you do is you create a very powerful and very invisible beam of electricity. You can't see a laser in broad daylight. You got to blow some smoke. That's when you see it, right? But you have this beam come down from this device from space using infinite power from space. And you start doing cookie cutters from space. How big and how these things operate, I don't know. But there are cookie cutters on the ground that Judy pointed out in her presentation. What do I mean by that? Well, 9/11's over, and NASA had done some pictures to complete the shock and awe package for the American people and the rest of the world, showing the whole area from space. It was a shot that 20 years ago was very easy to find, or 18 years ago, very easy to find, because you were meant to find it. You were meant to be traumatized by it. But when Judy Woods looked at the photograph and said, oh, wow, look, see all these cookie cutters all over the ground that are perfect circles all over the ground? Those are residual little pings from whatever did this in space. And the one that most likely hit the World Trade Centers was a lot bigger. So I get in this thing. I'm watching this presentation, and I bring up the photo. I'm not using hers, because she doctored hers, right? And these are from like NASA.gov back in the day. And she's absolutely right. There's all these cookie cutters from above. So you might go, okay, well, what do you mean by cookie cutter? Because I kind of understand, kind of don't understand. Well, imagine my house here. From something happens to it, a bunch of it gets destroyed. But there's no fire necessarily. Just a bunch of it vanishes. And in its place is a pyroclastic cloud, or at least a pile of ash of what was in this cylinder that's missing from my house. A cylinder, like a cookie cutter, just comes straight down from space and atomizes anything it hits of a particular material. Like the fires in Paradise, California, like I mentioned in my California Fires episode, you have engine blocks melting out, but plastic pieces not melted out. This happened first at 9/11. In 9/11, there was all kinds of cars parked all around this event. And because that frequency was so massive at times, parts of cars were melted away, coinciding with the parts that needed to melt away inside the Trade Center. Now, the Trade Center is also made of concrete, which is very difficult, I would imagine, to melt away, because concrete is a natural insulator against all radiation of any kind. So what would you use to get rid of the concrete? Thermite/thermate. Thermite and thermate is, the form I've seen it in, is it's like little, looks like Cocoa Puffs, little round, and it feels just like, like a Cocoa Puff. Some inert material, it just dries and it's like a little thing. But when you mix sulfur with it, the temperature at which thermite burns goes up considerably. Meaning you light this stuff with the fuse. So you could light it with the match. And all of a sudden you have 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit to like 4,200 degrees Fahrenheit instantaneously it will melt steel, and it will melt concrete. Well, you should probably also trigger the trusts, the little connection points around every floor to make the floor attach to the outer skeleton and the inner central column. Well, there's a bunch of fuckery going on, right? There was construction on both towers. Was it Martin Bush was running security for 6 months. Companies were forced to move floors in the middle of, like, no notification at all. You got to go to the second floor, or the floor up from you, or the one we just did. What? I'm running a whole company here, right? Who's going to pay for this, right? So we probably have thermite, the military grade of thermite. We have explosives at all the trusts. And we have directed energy weapons to finish it off from space, to make sure that whatever doesn't melt from space is blown the fuck up. You have I-beams that are massive, that flew across the street and embedded inside buildings. All right. When was the last time you dropped something straight and it flew? It doesn't fly unless there's force. Basic physics, right? Every reaction has an equal and opposite reaction. What did those towers look like when they fell? They cauliflowered down, right? They blew out. All 4 walls blew out. It just looked like a building being turned inside out. Force. Explosions. Okay. Plus, now you have things cut down to size by explosives, by thermite, and now you may not have to. You may assist in the process of atomizing it from space. This beam is constructed to do one thing: wiggle apart all of the atoms in a particular material. Now, they could have done it for steel, aluminum. I don't know if they can do plastics. I don't know if they could do woods. I don't know. It seemed like wood would be almost impossible. Like, it wouldn't react. But, who knows? But everything's getting turned into clouds by the time it hits the ground. That tipping piece never hit the ground in a full constructed piece. When the second tower fell, there's a beautiful shot of the communications tower on top. It falls for a few feet, and then you see it atomize and just blow away. Unbelievable. Right in your face, man. Now, of course, people can insinuate that it fell so quickly that the only thing that you saw was like the dust blowing off of it. But come on. Really? You got a big antenna? Yeah, it's been up there and no one's been up there to necessarily dust it off. But what's going to cause it to create a ghostly imprint of it just literally blowing to the side? And it's on an HD camera. So you're not talking about some crappy cell phone camera or some jittering helicopter footage. Someone is somewhere in New York with a really nice camera filming this, and it falls and you see it, and then it doesn't exist anymore. So, do directed energy weapons exist? Well, Donald Rumsfeld was asked by that woman. He says, his response to her saying, do you think that the enemy used directed energy weapons? Like, fucking Osama bin Laden's got goddamn directed energy weapons in space. I mean, really? Really? Yeah, oh, fuck yeah, man. He just bought the Heath kit online, the Acme directed energy weapon kit with the launch platform, and no problem. It was a ludicrous question, but it did get a great answer out of Rumsfeld, because Rumsfeld's standing next to some general who I'm sure Rumsfeld controlled. But he looks over at the dude and he's like, what do you think? Now, Rumsfeld is, he's his own man. Let's put it that way. He was a naval guy, I believe. He was a boxer. So he's like an LBJ, man. He's used to being able to, he's like a Gene Hackman. I don't mean to insult Gene, but, Gene could kick your ass, right? It doesn't matter how big you are. He just would beat you until he died, right? Or you win or he wins. So Rumsfeld's got some juice in his own brain. He's got juice all over fucking the Pentagon and everything, right? He helped run Searle Pharmaceutical to get aspartame into our food supply. The guy sold chemical weapons to fucking Saddam Hussein. He was a CIA agent. I mean, where there's fuckery, there's Donald Rumsfeld. But he says on the mic, remember, A few days earlier, he was talking about how the Pentagon had lost $2.2 trillion after cooking the books from $4.4 trillion down to $2.2 trillion, and then had all that investigation material stored on the side of the Pentagon that was hit by the missile. Up, investigation over. Trillions of dollars. You and I do not have the mental capacity to conceive of $1 trillion, let alone 4.4. But he says, yeah, we got those weapons. But, we're not going to use them until we really need them, right? It's like, Jesus Christ, if 9/11 happens and you're going to debate, what are you waiting for, Independence Day to use them? Seriously. But now here's my thought. For many years, I thought that's a dead giveaway that we actually have directed energy weapons, and look at Donald Rumsfeld admit it on camera. Maybe there's still 51% of my thought process on that opinion poll, but Donald is smart enough and clever enough and just one of these guys to lie. Just look at these folks and go, oh yeah, sure, we got that. We're not going to use it until... And then he gets back there with the Jones. He's like, I just like that answer. I can totally bullshit these people. But because we do think that these things were actually used for 9/11, whether or not he knows about it, which I'm sure he would, they most likely exist. Okay. And the theory isn't that intense. It's building the machine that is phenomenal, right? The Command and Conquer was pretty much on everyone's desktop by 1994. I can't remember the year it was released, but think about it. 1994, a video game theorizes this. Well, these guys are genius game designers. They read all the science fiction stuff. They read popular science magazines and whatever. And so they put it in the video game. So it's a viable theory. But when you look at these cookie cutter shots, they become remarkable. Because, and I'll try to find some, they're very difficult to find now. But you will see perfect round imprints in building roofs. Sometimes they completely penetrate the building. Sometimes look like they scored the top of the building. It was almost as if there was some residual plan to say, make sure all this is wiped out. Make sure it's so screwed up that we don't have to keep any of these buildings because we have a reconstruction effort that's going to take, roughly 20 years to memorialize this thing. We are going to build a big building in its place. They would have all that planned out. But there is a distinction you need to make when you're looking at these photographs, because you will see on the edge of the cleanup. And these shots were shot like within a week, within a few days of the event by some satellite up there, right? And distributed to us for its trauma programming. When you do put an earth mover to grab debris and then hand it off to trucks, you're picking up trash and handing it off to a truck. Well, you plop these things down. They have tracks. They're locked down. And then this thing swivels in a perfect circle like a compass. And so there are circles on the edges that are nice and clean, but you will see a crane directly in the center of the circle. So you might suspect, oh, wait a minute, maybe some of these things are related to cranes. Well, once you pay attention, you're like, oh my God, but these things are in the center of the pile. There are no recovery vehicles at all, and it will be months and months and months before anything gets to that part of the debris, because there are mountains of debris, all over the place between the entry points and these inner areas. So that's what kind of makes it very conclusive. Now, I can't quite remember the 3 degrees that Judy Woods has. Maybe I'll put it on the screen here. But I believe one of her degrees is metallurgy, which then when she talks about the foundries of metal that were videotaped, which the construction workers were utterly shocked to see. How many buildings have we destroyed intentionally using explosives with controlled demolition of family, which, by the way, was the first group of people, as reported, were allowed on the pile. CIA was not allowed on the pile. Controlled demolition was allowed on the pile. And why would that be? Well, they know what blasting caps look like. They know what blasting material looks like. They're going to clean all that up. Anything grossly, in the mind's eye, in the press's eye, someone walking by, seeing a blasting cap, going, "Holy shit, look at this!" It takes a little snap of it, puts it on the internet. Now, lucky for them, 2001 was early enough that we didn't have 4K phones, being able to shoot everything on planet Earth, right? But the foundries underneath, they were ridiculous. The firefighters were like, we're digging this stuff out, and then all of a sudden this, 2,000 degree smoke comes up, which will fry a human being in 2 seconds. And, even if you're in the radius of it, it can fry your lungs in 2 seconds. You'll never breathe again, meaning you're going to die of suffocating very quickly. But nothing explains that. We blow up buildings in Vegas all the time. There's not a foundry of metal underneath. Why is there a foundry? Well, thermate is going to liquefy anything that it gets in contact with, due exclusively to heat. So it's a Fahrenheit issue. Then you have directed energy weapons, which may have contributed to boiling this stuff away. Now, I think that the foundries are thermate-based problems, and I think that the stuff that was atomized doesn't necessarily thermalize at all. It turns into a cloud. Now, what's interesting about Building 7, just to take a spin off for 1 second, is the British reporter, the woman that said it had fallen about 25 minutes before it did. So she knew it was going to fall. She got the script and read it too quickly, and they literally cut her signal off as she's talking back to the BBC HQ. Oh, I'm sorry, we lost her signal. Oh yeah, we've never seen a movie before, so just keep lying to us. The other thing is that I don't know if they ever really meant for anything to touch the building. They said, everyone's buying bullshit, so why not sell them some more? Oh yeah, some furniture caught on fire and the whole building fell down. With the penthouse going first, right, because the central column's blown. People that were on the actual site said that there was a countdown on a bullhorn. I think there's some footage of that somewhere, but they cleaned that crap off really quickly. 2 guys were left inside to die. And one guy grabbed the other dude and ushered him out and said that dudes came from up above and stepped on them on the way out. Well, if you think there's just fires up in like floor 4, 5, 6, 7, and you're down on floor 1, you'd stop to help somebody. You wouldn't just run out, but you'd run out if you knew this place is about to blow. Get your ass out of there. And the whole day, the secondary explosions going off constantly. That's because they're blowing columns strategically, one at a time, making sure that not enough to make it fall yet, but enough to weaken it so that when it does start its collapse, the sequence of events and the bombs and the techniques are good enough to bring it down. Many of you have seen demolition today. It's been going on for decades, but you'll put up a video on YouTube to watch a demolition because they're kind of fun to watch, right? And you hear this bam, 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 but the building still hasn't fallen. And you keep watching. I just watched one the other day. And it was all da 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 da, and you see the flashes inside, still hasn't fallen. And then at one moment, then it's like boom, 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 and the whole thing comes down in one beautiful thing. I mean, these people who do this, maybe it's a lot easier than it looks, but I'm going to allow it to be mind-blowing still, that these guys can bring things down beautifully. And they don't always go as planned. That's usually in foreign third world countries. Directed energy weapons are the reason why we can't have these massive clandestine projects, meaning secret projects within intelligence agencies, within military agencies, that we have no fucking clue about. And what do I mean by that? Okay, you watch this episode, great, and you got the theory. Now go up to talk to someone that's just a random human being, or maybe someone you know that doesn't believe in conspiracies, in your family, and say, have you ever heard of directed energy weapons? No, what's that? Well, it's a weapon from space that can, or from a plane or whatever, that can hit something and atomize the molecule, like steel, aluminum, whatever, and just watch them, get deer eyes. That is a weapon that has been so utterly hidden that the very concept of the weapon is misunderstood. HARP. Talk to people about HARP. They have no clue that HARP exists. Well, they said they tore down the one in Alaska. How the hell do you get there to even verify? You got to take a plane to even get there. Because they built it in a super remote area because it's nice and secret. Everyone's pissed off about Hillary Clinton's emails, which you should be. Secret server? Okay, well, what's secret server? Why would you have a secret server? Because it's secret. If you're in the up and up, why not just use the government server? It's free and you don't have to pay for it. Because she was doing a pay-for-play through her foundation. Simple. Top secret emails going back and forth. All right, you don't like that? Great. You shouldn't. Now, what about these programs where humanity can't conceive that they exist? It's even more mind-fucking than time travel, right? If someone says, hey, did you hear the government's got time travel? Oh, you'd have half the people go, nah, I doubt it. The other half would go, yeah, you know what I heard. And so they understand it's a paradigm that exists in their mind. But directed energy weapons, they can't even conceive of it. You know, when the SR-71 was revealed, something else is up there. Project Aurora, Mach 13 or more. We've seen the B1, the B2, the B2A or whatever it's called. Okay, well, we know about planes. We know about reconnaissance spy planes. We know about bomber planes. And so we know about fighter jets. And so if someone's got a stealth one or a wild one, yeah, you know, it's like if something goes over your head, it looks like a football, and then a bomb goes off in your neighborhood, well, it's probably that thing that was moving so fast it looked like a tiny object, but it's actually a gigantic bomber plane, or something's really miniaturized, whatever, right? You can conceive of it in your head. You feel me, right? And here's the other thing. So how did I learn about this, and how did I get convinced about this? Well, I watched this gigantic documentary from this extremely educated female professor, but I had to watch a video. It was like 3 hours and 45 minutes or something like this. Who's going to do that if they don't want to believe in the first place? Nobody. But I've been in my lounge, several times where the subject comes up. And what's fun is that guys, where I live at least, they're really interested in everything. They may not believe everything, but I show them the cookie cutter cuts. And I'm pulling it up live. I don't have anything stored on my computer. I'm like, okay, let's just look this up. It takes a while to find the photo. I zoom into it. I start pointing at this stuff, and I said, how would that happen? Notice they're perfect circles. Man, you get these people going, oh, man, look at that. What the fuck is that? And I'm like, it's dirty deeds, man. So we're in this era of the Great Awakening. And the Great Awakening is at least a couple fold, right? It's 2 or 3 different steps of the red pilling process. One is to red pill yourself as much as you possibly can, but then keep your brain on and discern reality such that you can figure out what disinfo is being inserted into your red pill. The next stage would be to refining everything that you learned so well. And I'm probably not this guy, but refine it so well that anyone who sees it can't unsee it, and they become a believer of what is at least undeniably the truth. Now again, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, which is a .org, I believe, they can prove to you that the day's physics don't work. From the plane crashes to the structural collapses, they can prove it to you. All right, but you kind of have to be an academic to understand what they have come up with. The next stage is to filter that down to some telltale things, and then convert the other blue people, or the majority of the blues, over to the red side, having already pre-prepped and pre-filtered this info. So when you get a blue person coming over to the red side, they're like, oh, but I heard this. I heard there's aliens on the moon. You're like, oh, yeah, that's just so you'll believe that the moon missions occurred. Don't worry about that. Oh, really? Oh, fuck yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And I've told several people that's, a little line, and they're like, oh, yeah, you're right. Oh, yeah. Oh, God, I thought that was true. All right. The third tier up is sort of what's insinuated by the Q movement. Okay. So this guy says he's in the NSA. He says he's one of 9 people, and they're working together to bring down the deep state. Well, bringing down the deep state is quite a few steps, right? So they're having to literally physically attack the oligarchy that's been controlling this planet. The ones that are not in office, where you take someone out, you either kill them or detain them, and the world notices, right? You can't get rid of Queen Elizabeth, right? She might be playing ball right now, but you couldn't take someone like that out because you'd notice, right? Or they create a cover story, whatever. But you couldn't take out the whole royal family, right? I'm not attacking them personally. I'm just saying that's an example of what you can't do. But you can take out a Rothschild, a George Soros. People are going to notice, kind of. But at the level that they are, if anyone gets the word, they're dead, right? Yeah, I heard. Is this shit all coming down? I think so. Is it that Trump guy? Yeah, and the whole U.S. military. Holy shit. Yep, and there's a bunch of talk underneath us about all of our people coming after us. You see the Paris riots, you see the Hong Kong shit. There's a bunch of riots with this Q guy all over the place. We got to get rid of that Q guy. Okay, we'll finger him for a manifesto on HN. But let's say Q's successful. The United States military / Donald Trump is successful getting rid of all these deep state organizations. The Federal Reserve is completely liquidated. Maybe they start a new bank with a different name. Maybe they keep that name and they gut the place. Trying to, maybe reduce the impact on us as human beings, on citizens, right? But then, transparency has to be the policy. And we already know that there are anti-transparency movements all over the place. And we have succumbed to their excuses as to why this should remain hidden from the populace. What are some examples? Well, we got a place in Groom Lake called Area 51. All right. Nobody knows what the fuck's going on. They won't even tell you it exists. All right. Well, that's a little too far. Now we have satellite photographs. We know it exists. All right. Now we can't tell you what we're doing. Well, you got to tell us what you're doing. You don't need to tell us, okay, the schematics of the Aurora plane project. You may not need to really disclose that to us, but the Russians know. The Chinese know. I mean, shit, half of our previous administrations sold them everything, gave them everything, so they know everything. So why hide it from the people? Yeah, okay, here's what we're doing. This is how I'd handle it. It's some joint press conference with all the heads of state that could answer questions. I'd say the pipeline to create covert aircraft is something like this. Various organizations in the United States are hired to create, through a skunkworks program, meaning hidden program, you're not to know, new technologies like the SR-71, B-1, B-2. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base has been fingered as one of these research centers, and then they farm it out to Lockheed Martin or some other organization to build it. Once it's built, it is transported either on the ground or flown to this Groom Lake Area 51 at night, and then it's tested to the nines. It's flown out of that out of that base, right? So no one can see it go up. All right. I have no idea what the space jurisdiction is over the United States. I mean, does Russia have the permission from the United States to run a geocentric orbit or satellite array over the United States taking pictures of us? Do they have some sort of Aurora jet that flies over us and takes pictures at night and during the day? Don't know. No idea. But if they told us about that pipeline, they go, look, okay, there's a bunch of secret stuff. It's related to aeronautical engineering, space travel. That's it. But if they have a time travel program, they say it. If they've got aliens stuck on some, Club Med in Groom Lake, then they should tell us. Now, if you have a feeling inside yourself when I say that makes you think that I'm naive, even insinuating such a thing, I would remind you that a bunch of people thought Hillary was going to win the election. Oh, she's definitely going to win. Why? Well, she's old school. She, is going to throw the votes or whatever. No way an independent guy can come in, even if he's running in the Republican Party. It happened. The impossible happened. According to Q, it happened because the vote was protected for the very first time. I could count on one hand the people that have told me to my face they voted for Hillary. Maybe there's a lot more that just regret they did, but we can make change. We really, really can. And boy, what do you want to wait for, right? Like, what are you waiting for to make change? Everyone waking up? Well, that's what's happening right now. Everyone's waking up. So jump on board. Now, one of the other sort of waking up principles goes like this. Some of you have what Q calls the autist gene. Doesn't mean you're autistic. It just means that you can research things at a level that most people can't. And you can discern information like most people can't. I mean, canceling out things that look ridiculous. But then there's also a quality in some folks that you can learn everything and remember it. And so you have this other extra thing you can do. But some of folks I know can't remember things very well. Doesn't matter what age they are. Not sure why. But they can remember a couple things extremely well. And so I think it would be phenomenal for everyone to pick something, regardless of their capacity and capability of recalling. Simply fill up the cup as full as you can fill it up without suffering any slings or arrows of your own insanity. And then that becomes your topic. Judy Woods has done her business in the directed energy weapon area. She probably will come out of whatever else she's doing to talk about the Paris fires, the other fires in California here, and chime in and say, yes, that's possible. No, that's not. Last time I saw her, she was heavily into chemtrails. She was studying the nanosystems that are being dropped, the crystalline stuff. Go see my episodes on Morgellons disease. You'll see all the photographs and how the piezo effect can actually cause wormy-looking things to grow out of crystals and to construct damn near organically patented nanosystems that can junction things together. It's terrifying, man, when you see that Morgellons research. It's all under Agenda 21 / Agenda 2030. Now, I made a couple clarifications there. Obviously, Agenda 21 stands for the 21st century. For it to get a subsequent name, 2030, that's where it becomes scary. That's approximately 10 years from today. Scary. What's going to be the game in 2030, right? That's like tomorrow for most of us, right? You got a kid that just is born today, 10 years. Kid's 10 years old. It's nothing, man. And so it is imperative. Right now, the crazies who believe in climate change, or the bought-off shills that believe in climate change, are running around disturbing Black Fridays. That's just kind of funny. I think Black Friday is a bunch of bullshit. I mean, I think Black Friday online, if you can do it, it's great. But storming a department store in the middle of the night, for me, is just crazy. You're living outside your means if that's how you have to get your products. This stuff is exhausting as well. Right? So you can bring climate change stuff to people, and what's funny is, like, when I give people that quick lesson about how much CO2 is in the greenhouse gas layer index, which is every chemical and gas that is responsible for making us have an atmosphere with warmth, and it's 0.054% of a single percent, and we're only 1.5% of that percent. It's nothing. It's absolutely negligible. But you can tell some people this, and they are so ignorant to the facts and how science works that their brain is like, well, it wouldn't be on the news if it wasn't real. I had a waitress stop me at a Chick-fil-A, and she is just, I finally told her to her face, I said, look, I don't want to hear you talk to me if what you're going to say is negative, because that's all you ever say is negativity. She's this weird chick. But she said that, and about global warming, and it's global warming, because it was like a really warm day in November. So, of course, global warming, because it's climate change for her, because they rebranded it to hide the fact that everything's getting colder. But I tried to lay something down for her, but she's not really kind of one of us, so it's tough. But I sat there and watched her eyes glaze over. It was like I just told her we didn't go to the moon, and she's kind of like, what? I talked to the manager, because she cross-pollinated his concerns, and I just told him, I said, it's not real, man. You got to relax. Get rid of that out of your head. If you need to know the science, let me know. Well, it's not bad for us, but it's going to be really bad for our kids, last thing he said, which means I didn't hear what you said, and I still think this is going to destroy the world for our children. It's like, come on, people. The air in Los Angeles has never been cleaner since I got here. Should it be cleaner? Sure. Again, to be against the scam of climate change does not mean you are for everything that's making the world suck. It just means we don't fix things through lies, right? So anyway, hope you feel me on this one. That was a great idea. Just need to do a quick pass on this. If you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. It's more important now than ever that you sort of bookmark that website, just in case the show has any turbulence in the future, in the places that you're more accustomed to finding it. If it does have a problem, here's the thing. It's because the information I'm presenting is so critical for your brain that they need to get rid of it. It empowers you too much with the truth. I am not 100% accurate, probably, anything that I say, but I'm trying my very best to give you the best information I have pre-discerned, right? Pre-filtered. So get over there. There is YouTube and BitChute. Make sure you make yourself a BitChute account, bitchute.com. Please subscribe to the channel over there, but if nothing else, just make yourself an account and walk away. We have all the podcasts you'd ever want up there. We have 3 social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Minds.com. Minds.com is the new competitor to Facebook. They need users. It's a beautiful, beautiful platform. And I believe it's blockchain-based, so it's pretty cool. There's a few ways of donating to the page, PayPal and Patreon. To my Patreon listeners, thank you so much for hanging on all these years. You do make a difference up there. There's 2 products I want you to consider. Definitely get the Brave browser. It's free. It cuts off the deep state. Switch your search engine from Google to DuckDuckGo. You will poke their eye right out of your house. It's awesome. If you need backup software, go get Backblaze.com for $7 a month. You will not find any season 1 episodes on this channel because I have moved them all, remastered them to another channel. The link is right up there on the webpage. But if you just watch everything off the website, then you have the best of all worlds. Because I will get you to where it needs to go. If this channel shuts off, everything will go BitChute, and we'll just lose 4K. It'll be all 1080p, which will suck, but we can live, right? But until the next episode, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.